Hello, clay lovers. I hope everybody's doing well during this time, or as well as can be expected anyway. Um, I know I'm missing this studio, and I'm sure you are too. I can't wait to get back. Some of you might be lucky enough to be working from home, which is wonderful. But today I wanted to share some guidelines about working at home and how to stay safe and healthy while you're doing that. As you know, there are some issues with clay and glaze, and we have to take care to not do damage to ourselves during this time, especially COVID-19, which is, a risk to your lungs. So is clay dust. So we want to keep that to a minimum. The clay dust has silica in it, and if it gets into your lungs, it doesn't come back out. So eventually, over time, it builds up and can cause real problems. Glaze dust also has silica in it, but it also has some other elements that are not so great for us in it. So you don't want to be breathing either one of those. So how can we be the most safe and healthy? Well, first, let's look at the setting. It's best to dedicate a space that's not used for other things, okay, in the house, if you can possibly do that. But for sure, not in the kitchen, okay? That's not a great place to be doing your clay work. Carpeted areas aren't so hot either. Kitchen, that's where your food is, and you don't want to have clay dust or glaze dust in places that could get into your food or beverages. Carpeted areas, they're hard to clean, and so the dust can get down in the carpet fibers and can be especially toxic to children and pets. So you don't want to go there. Here are some places that are terrific for working at home. If you've got the space, a garage, a patio, a porch, or an uncarpeted basement. Any of those would be okay for doing, but suppose you don't have that and you have to dedicate a room in your house. Well, let's think about that. First, you want to cover your cold air vents so that the air return, so the dust doesn't get in that return and go in and be blown through the whole house. You want to close off the area, so either close a door, or if there is no door, maybe put some plastic up. And then you want to spread a plastic tarp or an old plastic shower curtain on the floor under you. It just makes cleanup a lot easier. And it could save, if you're working on wood floors, it could save those. Now while you're working, you don't want to have any open food around you. And you don't want any open beverages. So if you do have a beverage with you, make sure it's in a travel cup or in a thermos with a top on it so that you can keep the dust out of it when you're working. You don't want to be sanding your clay or your glaze during this time. The dust will come up and it doesn't dissipate down for a long time. So you don't want to do that. You also don't want to be carving dry glaze or dry clay or dry glaze. You don't want to be carving those because those little bits dry out too and can flutter up. So if you are carving clay or glaze, you might want to squirt it down real well with a squirt bottle first to minimize that dust. If you got to do these kinds of things, go outside, okay? And ideally, you should be wearing a mask. Now, masks are at a premium right now, so that might not be possible, and it may not be a great idea to be doing this kind of work at home. Also, I forgot to add it to the list, but you should be dedicating a pair of shoes to your workspace. So keep those shoes in the workspace, put them on when you get in there, and when you leave, take them off and put on your other shoes. That way, you're not traipsing clay dust and glaze dust throughout your house. So when it's time to clean up, no brooms, no vacuums. Big no-nos. These stir up dust, okay, and can make more trouble than they're worth. So how do you clean up? Well, the sponge is your friend. So a wet sponge will keep the clay dust down and clean up your area. Now, sponging is good, but it will, when it dries, it will leave a residue on surfaces, and so you don't want to be working on good furniture because you'll end up with a haze, a dusty haze afterwards. So be careful about that. Don't use your sink, especially your kitchen sink, for cleaning tools or your hands. In the studios, our sinks have clay traps underneath them, and those traps catch the clay and keep it from getting into the plumbing. But you don't have a clay trap, and so it won't take long for you to have a major plumbing problem if you're washing clay into your sink. So best practice would be to get a bucket of water and rinse your hands and your tools and your brushes in the water until they're relatively clean. Then you can go back to your sink and finish the cleaning process in the sink safely. Now, once you've got this bucket of water, if it gets dirty, you could go out in your yard and dump it in your yard. It's best not to dump it where you're growing edible plants, but anywhere else is fine. If you don't want to dump the water, you can let the water dry out and then just discard the dried contents in the bucket. It sometimes helps if you could have two buckets and alternate them so that one is drying out or getting ready, you're getting rid of your contents, and the second one you're working on and it's in your space. To speed up the drying process, you could, after the sediment settles, you could safely pour off the top water and then maybe dump the contents onto a pan or a piece of plastic or gravel or something and let it dry more quickly that way. So these are just some ideas for helping you keep your workspace and your work process safe and healthy while you're working at home. I can't wait to see what everybody produces, and I'm really looking forward to seeing everybody back in the studio.